Hi, everybody. Let's dive into Chapter 3, Theater Spaces, beginning on page 47 of the textbook. When we attend the theater, our experience begins in advance. Sometimes we read or hear reports of the play online or in print. We anticipate seeing a particular actress or actor or a specific type of production. We buy tickets and make plans with friends to attend. And before the performance, we gather outside the theater space with other members of the audience. That's the very beginning of Chapter 3. And that's very true. It also applies to us moviegoers as well. Whether you attend a movie at Cinemark or wherever, or a live theater performance, the environment is very similar, and that's what we're really discussing in the introduction of Chapter 3 as we begin to discuss theater spaces and the different types of theatrical stages. So think about that for a moment. We after let's take after the show, for example, and this, just like a movie, we do this in the theater. The show is over. If we go outside to the lobby after the show, there might be people we know. We may have friends attending the same show, so you run into someone you know and you chit chat for a bit. Maybe you talk about the movie. Now, even if you leave right after the show, on that drive home, what normally happens? You talk about the movie, right? Or you talk about the show, the play. And you discuss different scenes and different characters. And the discussion can take all kinds of forms, but you discuss different theatrical elements. You could talk about the special effects. You could talk about the lighting, the costumes, the acting, etc., etc. So, and looking at the environment, as an audience, we have one feeling if we come into a formal setting, such as a picture frame stage, and you're going to learn more about that in just a moment. We come into a formal setting with a picture frame stage. There's very fancy carvings, plaster carvings or wooden carvings that make up the proscenium arch, which is the picture frame stage. The picture frame I'm referring to. It's goes around the stage. There could be crystal chandeliers. There could be very plush red fabric, red carpet. There could be plush fabric on the seating, making for a very formal theatrical experience. The auditorium looks exceptionally clean, as it should be. Nothing against movie theaters, but come on, sometimes they can be pretty nasty, right? Especially after a show, and then they have a crew that comes in and cleans up and gets everything cleaned up for the next film. But that is one of the difference between an auditorium in a movie theater and an auditorium in a play theater. Often there is a different kind of etiquette. And I'm not going to go into that now. We'll talk about that in another chapter. But when we go to the theater, we are expected to be quiet when the show starts. We've been told for years to silence our cell phones, to not talk on the cell phone, to not take calls, to be quiet. If you have to whisper to the person sitting next to you, you whisper to them. But there is a certain etiquette that we follow, and that etiquette still exists. Of course, it exists in the theater, but it's even more formalized in the theater. If a cell phone rang during a play or a musical, a stage musical, then that person is normally mortified that the cell phone has gone off, during this production. Not that you wouldn't be embarrassed if that happened at a movie theater, but there is this etiquette that we are expected to follow. I said I didn't want to get off on a tangent, but we'll talk more about etiquette at another time. So back to the environment of the theater. I mentioned a picture frame stage. That is called a proscenium, and that term is defined in the textbook on page 48. The proscenium, it refers to an arch or a frame. Think picture frame. You're in the audience, you're looking at the stage, and what we have is a picture. So that frame surrounding the stage, it goes up the wall and along the top of the stage, it comes down the other side. That arch or frame that surrounds the stage makes it like a picture box. So that's a proscenium arch, a proscenium stage, a proscenium theater. What other kinds of spaces do we have in the theater? Other kinds of, when I say space, I'm also referring to the type of stage. Okay, so I don't want to confuse you. Know that we use these terms interchangeably. So it's a proscenium arch that we see above the stage. That gives the stage its name, a proscenium stage, or this is a proscenium theater. What about the arena? Now, the arena stage is entirely surrounded by the audience. Think about being in your old high school gymnasium, or you're attending a sporting event. You're going up to see the Cincinnati Bengals play or something, and we've all been in arenas, right? Sporting arenas. That's what I'm talking about. That came from the theater. That came from ancient Greece. The arena stage, or the arena theater, that's a stage entirely surrounded by the audience. Now, we have other names for the arena stage. The arena stage is also called circle theater, also called theater in the round. So you should know all three of those. They are discussing the same thing. The arena stage, also known as circle theater, also known as theater in the round. The performers are in the middle. The playing space is in the middle, and the audience surrounds the players on all four sides. So we have this arena environment. So we've talked about the proscenium, we've talked about the arena. A third type of stage, or third type of theater, is called the thrust stage. Thrust stage. This is stage space that actually thrusts into the audience. A stage surrounded on three sides by audience seating. And I'll point out in the textbook in a moment, you can look at, you can look at photographic images of these different types of stages. Moving on past the thrust stage, we have what's called a black box. Black box theater. This is a space that's open, it's flexible, it's adaptable. The seating inside a black box is also flexible and adaptable. It could be that in a black box you simply have folding chairs, right? Hopefully padded, for the comfort of the audience, but folded chairs that can easily be moved around into different configurations. Imagine you're setting up for a wedding event, and you have a stage on one side of the room, and on the other side you have your seating, right? A groom on one side, bride on the other, an aisle down the middle. Well, that kind of flexibility is what I'm talking about. Let's say you've been asked to go into this room and decorate it, configure it for a wedding. What would you do? The black box gives you that kind of flexibility. So if I walk into a black box and I'm going to direct a show here, I can look around and say, you know what I'd like to do? We're going to put the stage over there. We're actually going to put it in the corner. And the stage is, let's say it's maybe 2.5 feet off the ground, 15 feet in diameter. And so it's a relatively small stage. And we're going to I want my seating to actually go around the room in a semicircle. So you understand what I'm saying. You can adapt the space to whatever you want, whatever's possible. You can also adapt the lighting in the space as well. So that's the black box. Black boxes are very common in university and college theater. My undergraduate experience, when a student wanted to direct a production, a small play, maybe a one-act play, or you were taking a class and you were required to direct a scene from a play, students would often use the black box theater. So the black box is, you could say, it's also good for student productions, one-act plays, short plays, large plays, main stage productions, as we sometimes call them. That's where we want to, maybe we do a rehearsal in the black box, perhaps even a few rehearsals in a black box. But ideally, the bigger the show, you want a larger theater space. So we would take that to the main auditorium. Other types of theaters, professional theaters, have black box theaters as well. So moving on, there is a term that some of you might be familiar with, because we certainly use it in film studies as well, and that is the fourth wall. What is the fourth wall? This is a convention in the theater that the audience is looking into a room through an invisible fourth wall. You've probably heard the expression breaking the fourth wall, and that's what I'm talking about. So let's say in a proscenium arch theater that the audience is looking into a room through an invisible wall, right? And we have what we call a suspension of disbelief. So I'm in the audience, I'm looking at the stage, and what I'm seeing on stage is part of a large castle. Okay, let's say it's Dracula. I'm watching Dracula, and we are seeing on stage Dracula's castle in all of its glory. And there's a spiral staircase, going up into the top of the proscenium. And it's a beautiful set. It's very, it's gorgeous. It's Dracula's, castle. If you're familiar with the story, if you've seen movies based on Dracula, and all of that came from the stage play before it was ever a film. So breaking the fourth wall. What's popular? Movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that's from 1986, or Deadpool. The Deadpool films by Marvel, we have the character breaking the fourth wall often to speak directly to the audience, right? So we'll talk a bit more about that as we move forward, through the course. I want you to be familiar with what we call the front of the house. There's a lot of terms in chapter 3, so I want to get all those in. If you have any questions, you please don't forget to email me, and anything I need to clarify, please let me know. The front of the house. This is on page 49. That is a portion of the theater reserved for the audience. Sometimes we simply call it the house, right? Have you looked out in the house? How big is the crowd? We might say we're backstage, and it's let's say it's 15 minutes before curtain, and I say to my assistant stage manager, "What's the house look like?" Right? They're going to go and they're going to look on a monitor or maybe peek behind the curtain, and they're going to look out into the auditorium, and they're going to come back and say, "Wow, it's really filling up. It's a good crowd tonight." There's a lot of people out there. So that is the house. I'm talking about that auditorium space, right out from the stage. Maybe in the back of the house, you might have a tech booth, the technical booth, where the soundboard, the lighting board, all of our technical equipment is kept and operated, if the tech booth is in the back of the house. So know that term, front of the house. That's the portion of the theater reserved for the audience. And again, sometimes we call it simply the house. I want you to know what a rake is. R-A-K-E. A rake. And not the kind that you take out in the yard and you rake the leaves in the fall. The rake, in theater usage, is the slant of an auditorium or stage floor. Think about being in a movie theater. Do you notice how the seating of that auditorium space, it slants upward, right? The stage is raised several feet above the auditorium floor, if you think about it, and that simply helps to add visibility for the audience. Sometimes you have a balcony. Those were really popular at one time in many theaters. We don't see that much these days. You see that in old theaters, but you would have a balcony or two balconies protruding about halfway over the main floor. So the rake, that to position scenery on a slant or at an angle other than parallel or perpendicular to the curtain line, that's considered a rake. And also an upward slope of the stage floor away from the audience. That is a rake. Okay, I hope that's clear. If not, let me know. I think I made it clear. But that's what a rake is. We're referring to that slant, that slope, the seating as it goes upward toward the back of the auditorium, away from the stage. Orchestra is a term I want you to be familiar with. Orchestra. The main floor, okay? The main floor is called, in American usage, the orchestra. In ancient Greek theater, the orchestra was the circular acting area at the base of the hillside amphitheater. That was called the orchestra. Sometimes I refer to it as the orchestra pit. That's where, if you're in a stage musical, we have the musicians sometimes sitting down right off the stage, right near the front row in the orchestra or orchestra pit. Let's see, moving on, page 50, you see there's a photograph of a proscenium stage at the top of page 50. That's a theater. See the arch, um, the picture frame, right? Looks like a picture frame. That's a proscenium. Many times your proscenium doesn't look like a picture frame as it's very ornate. Okay, that what I'm seeing on page 50 really looks like a picture frame, but many of them are very ornate. The plaster, the molding can be very fancy and decorative. The bottom of page 50 gives you um, a rendering, a sketch of a modern proscenium stage theater. Moving on to page 52. Take a look at the diagram on 52. Here we have the stage areas. And what may look to be such a simple diagram is so important in theater. It's important to the performances, the performers. It's important for the director, for the designers. Everybody involved with the production has to know this diagram like the back of their hand. Backstage, and you see there on the stage, it's divided up into 9 boxes, 9 sections. We have center stage, located directly in the center of the stage. To the right, we have right center. To the left, we have left center. And then we have down center, down right, down left. Go back up, we have up center, up right, up left. It's important to know these stage designations. An actor has to know, again, like the back of their hand, because the director, we're going to get into this when we discuss directing, which is the next chapter, but the director is in charge of blocking. And blocking is all of the movements that the actors and the performers make on stage. It's also, it serves as the location for which all of the set pieces go. So if I tell a stagehand that I want that chair to go and sit down stage right, they need to know where down right is. And think about, pretend you're on the stage and pretend you're looking out at the audience. Stage right is your right. Stage left is your left. Okay, it's not from the audience point of view. If you were sitting in the audience, it would be the audience right, audience left. But when you're on stage as a performer, and this goes for everyone that's working on the production, it is actors left and it's actors right. Okay, so we have offstage right, we have offstage left, we have the backstage area. And notice on the diagram you see what is called an apron. That apron is really just a lip on the stage, right on the edge of the stage. It's an area that an actor might be told to go that far down center or that far down right, that far down left. That's the edge of the stage. And then if you go off the stage, if you go off the apron, that could be that orchestra area that we were talking about. And then we have the audience. So take a look at those stage areas. Look those over, try and commit those to memory. Looking at page 53, there we have a diagram of an arena stage at the bottom of 53. See how the audience sits on 4 sides in a circle surrounding the stage? Moving on to page 54, we have another diagram there at the bottom of 54 of an arena theater. The audience surrounding all sides of the performance. A practical advantage of the arena theater would be economy. I mean, all you need for this kind of theater is a large room, a large space. You designate a playing space. You can arrange rows of seats around the sides. You can hang lights on pipes above, and there you have a theater. I mean, elaborate scenery is impossible because it would block the view of large parts of the audience. So, a few pieces of furniture with perhaps a lamp or a sign hung from the ceiling. That's all you need to really indicate where a scene takes place. So think about that, how many low budget groups have found that they can build a workable and even attractive theater in the round when a proscenium theater would be out of the question. So keep that in mind. I've been to many an arena theater, which I most often, by the way, I most often refer to it as theater in the round. I'm accustomed to that. Much of that came from my undergraduate experience. So I was an actor in plays that were done with theater in the round. It's a lot of fun. It has its own set of challenges, but and we see a photograph of an arena stage and a performance at the top of page 55. On page 56, we see the thrust stage. Notice how the stage thrusts out into the audience. This is also called three-quarters seating. Three-quarters seating. The stage is surrounded on three sides by the audience. So the seating is much in a semicircle. And although the audience is surrounding the action, scene changes and in other stage effects are still possible. Now, what is a scene change? That's what it sounds like. That's when a scene needs to change in the production. So let's say you're going from one scene to the next, and there's a blackout or the lights go dim. You could close the curtain if need be, and we move set pieces out. We move set pieces in. We are going to change the scene from Dracula's castle. We're going to change it to a courtyard scene. So it goes from indoors to outdoors, and it may take 5 minutes to make that scene change happen, and then the lights come back up, the curtain opens, and we have a new scene. So that's just wanted you to understand what I mean by a scene change. You can see a photograph of the original thrust stage at the top of page 57. And there we have what is referred to as an original prototype of the thrust stage, the amphitheater in ancient Greece. Among many other remarkable traits of these theaters, I mean, look at the view. That's just a photograph, but I've never been to Greece. I would love to go one day, but look at that. The incredible view of the mountains in the distance and the amazing acoustics, as I understand that the acoustics are incredible in that theater space. A wagon stage is mentioned on page 57. You need to know how to define a wagon stage. That is a low platform mounted on wheels or casters by means of which scenery is moved on and off stage. A wagon stage, also simply called a wagon. A wagon stage was widely used from the 13th to the 14th centuries in England and various parts of Europe. An interesting coincidence is that an almost identical theater took shape in Spain about the same time, and the inns, as in a hotel, okay, the INN, the inns in Spain were called corrals. And that term is also on page 57. The inns in Spain were called corrals, and this name was given to the theaters that developed there in Spain. So a corral is a theater building of the Spanish Golden Age, and these corrals were located in a courtyard of a series of adjoining buildings. That again is on page 57. Oh, also on page 57, or excuse me, on page 56 and 57 is the platform stage. I almost left that out. Platform stage is a simple platform that is set on trestles, sometimes called a trestle stage. So this platform stage is an elevated stage, but there is no proscenium. Okay? No proscenium. And you would see a platform stage that could be set up at one end of an open courtyard. So think of the courtyards I was just describing a moment ago in Spain, and you would have the inn and a courtyard. So we would see a platform stage there set up at one end of the courtyard. Let's move on to page 58. We see a classic Spanish stage at the top of 58. That's a variation of the thrust stage used in Elizabethan England. And at the bottom of page 58, we see a modern thrust stage. Notice how the stage area is extending into the audience seating. On page 59, we see a diagram of an Elizabethan playhouse. So think Shakespeare. Shortly after Shakespeare's day, in the latter part of the 17th century, there were two significant theatrical developments in England. Two of them. Well, in England, in Spain, and throughout Europe, actually. The theater moved almost completely indoors. Okay, that's the first significant development. The theater moved almost completely indoors. The second development was the stage began a slow but steady retreat behind the proscenium opening, partly because performances were indoors, but more because the style of theaters was really just changing. So take a look at that diagram there, Elizabethan Playhouse, page 59. On the top of page 60, we see a diagram of a thrust stage. It's a really good diagram. It reminds me of the stage that I performed on during my undergraduate years at the university. Created and found spaces are discussed on page 61, continuing on page 62. And when we're talking about created and found spaces, we're talking about non-theater buildings, buildings that have been converted to a theater space. It could be that the building was it's a warehouse, It's an old building. It was a hardware store. Let's say the building's located on Main Street in anywhere in America, because every city in America had a Main Street with a department store, and that went out of business probably sometime in the late 1980s or early 1990s, and perhaps it sat vacant for a number of years. And then it was purchased and converted into a local community theater, or even a local professional theater. So converted spaces. You can read about that on page 61 and 62. Pause for a moment. I'm looking at my notes. Immersive theater on page 64. Another popular current movement that has also led us to reconsider traditional theater spaces is immersive theater. An immersive production, well, audience members are asked to become part of the production. So often having to move through spaces, often not in theater spaces, but found or site-specific spaces, and to interact with the performers. So in immersive theater, audience members play an active role in some way in the action of the play. Adapted spaces, also mentioned on page 64. A frequent practice was using or creating a space to fit a play, rather than, as is normally the case, you make the play fit the stage. Well, with adapted spaces, we're the notion of finding a different appropriate configuration for each production. So that's it's a very interesting an interesting take on that. Multi-focus theater is mentioned on page 65. Multi-focus theater, an environment in which there is more than one playing area. So this means not only that there is more than one playing area, such as all four corners of the room, but also that something is going on in several of them simultaneously. So one of my experiences with multi-focus theater was a series of traveling murder mysteries. I was part of a murder mystery company for a number of years. I'm going to say about 5 or 6 years. And we would travel to different museums and historic sites. And the plays we performed were written based on historical events. I mean, the playwright would take certain liberties, but for the most part, it was based on actual historic events that pertained to that particular museum or historic site. And we, like any good murder mystery, there were different things happening at all at once. So you could go into one room and watch a scene, two actors in a scene, or you might watch that for a few minutes, and you might wander over to the parlor where 3 actors are having an argument. So you're gonna watch and listen and take notes, and you're trying to figure out who committed the crime, who committed the murder, or whatever. So that's my experience with multi-focus theater, and I think that's a good example here. So, the black box that I mentioned earlier, there is a diagram on page 66, and you can see how there are 4 different options shown here for a black box theater. You see how I was explaining how the black box is so flexible and adaptable. The stage is flexible and adaptable. the seating of the audience can be flexible or adaptable. Um, so that's chapter 3, and had a lot of terms to get through with that chapter. So, guys, any questions at all, any clarifications, let me know. We've had a few new people add the course this week, so that's great. The last time I checked, we have 15 students now. You like the course? Tell your friends if it's not too late to add. I'd love to have more students come aboard. And next, we're going to talk about chapter 4. I'm going to introduce you to directing for the stage. And also, by the middle of February, I believe it's the 19th or 20th, I don't have the syllabus in front of me, your first paper is due, and that's the Theatrical Criticism Part 1. I have you do 2 of these throughout the semester, but you can look on Brightspace at the assignment and what that consists of. It's never too soon to start that assignment. You see, you have to watch one of 2 productions. I've got the links on Brightspace. One of them is the Reduced Shakespeare Company, the Reduced Shakespeare, and that's a comedy, by the way. It's a farce. It's a wacky physical comedy, or you can watch Into the Woods, the original stage production from 1987. Some of you might be familiar with the Disney film that came out, I think around 2016 or so. That there were a lot of stars in that one. Johnny Depp played the wolf, the big bad wolf. So maybe you've seen that film adaptation. It's different though. It's, if you've seen the movie, the play, the original musical is different. So they made some changes, as they often do. That's what an adaptation is. Whether you're adapting a novel to the stage, or whether you're adapting a play to the silver screen, we are talking about adaptations. So things are going to get changed. There are going to be edits, and changes will be made. Some of you may be the kind of person that says, the book is always better. The book is better than the movie every time. You say, I like the movie, but the book is better. Or you may hate the movie and the book is phenomenal. Well, that's the essence of what I'm talking about with an adaptation. There have been times when I love the movie, and then the movie's adapted to the stage, and I'm like, I don't really like the stage version, or it goes the other way. There are so many films that were plays. They were plays or stage musicals long before they became a movie. And there have been times when I just, I like the stage version better. So, and these are the types of things that when you do your theatrical, I'm sorry, let me get back to the theatrical criticism. Yes, my point was, don't procrastinate. I would encourage you to watch one of the productions soon and go ahead and make notes. Take notes while you watch the production. And again, you have 2 choices: the Reduced Shakespeare Company, the Reduced Shakespeare Abridged, or you can watch Into the Woods. Not the movie, okay? No. Look at the links that I've provided on Brightspace. I want you to watch the original stage production because it's quite different from the film. So, and in the assignment, the theatrical criticism, I give you a template, which is on Brightspace, and you will answer those questions on that template. And in doing so, you ultimately you're writing a paper. This isn't just where you can comment and make a few comments, and you're going to actually answer the questions I've provided, and try and use the theatrical terminology that you've been learning. Now, again, this assignment is not due until mid-February, but I'm simply saying you may not want to procrastinate this. Go ahead and take a look at that now. At the very least, get familiar with that assignment. Theatrical Criticism, Part 1. Any questions, let me know. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.